What's up, ladies and gentlemen, how's it going? It's Dan here from Cryonoir, and welcome to my game making journey part 29. Before we get into it, if you enjoy the video, don't forget to hit the subscribe and the like and the little notification bell so that way you get notified every time I upload a video. As you can tell, we're at my game making journey part 29, so this has been a long journey spanning many years. So if you want to go right back to the beginning where it all began, then that would be obviously game making journey part 1. And then on from there. So without further ado, let's crack on. During the past year and a half of building the ill-fated app, I did try to squeeze in some more of my own usual work. The idea was that I might make enough money from the app that I'd be able to quit my day job and go into developing for realsies. I had a number of ideas floating around in my brain noggin about what I'd like to build. The idea that I kept coming back to was a fast-paced FPS Metroidvania with some sort of flat-shaded polygonal aesthetic type thing. Kind of like Quake meets Metroid Prime meets Virtua Fighter. I'd seen some videos for Unity's Pro Builder and thought it looked just a ticket for building the levels, so I started a new project and began building. Even with limited time and no experience, I was able to mock up a test room. I'd use this to do all my testing in, such as weapons, enemy AI, combat, movement and other stuff. I figured that way I could dip in and out of it as and when I had time, try and get all the fundamentals built and working, and then when I came back to game development, I'd have a good starting point to get cracking with. I also had to play around in Blender as I'd need to build all of the assets and such. I did the first parts of Blender Guru's donut tutorial and made the same donut that everyone else does. I can really see why the tutorial is popular, because the end result is genuinely a photorealistic donut. I also had a bash at remaking the Cryonoir logo in 3D as well, with mixed results. I figured that seeing as I was transitioning from a 2D developer to a 3D developer, it was only right that my logo should do the same. Even though it doesn't amount to much, this was all over a number of months. During this time, however, things were stirring over at Epic. About 2 months after I'd started work on the app, Epic acquired Quixel, who had created one of the world's largest Megascan libraries. Not only that, but if you were using it in Unreal, you had unlimited access across the whole library for free. This was a huge game changer. Unlimited access to Hollywood quality assets, literally some of the best looking assets in the world for free. I mean, that's staggering. That in itself would have been a very compelling reason to ditch Unity and head over to Unreal. They also announced a new revenue structure where you didn't have to pay anything to Epic unless your game made more than $1 million, which was nice. Then, in May 2020, we got the trailer for Unreal Engine 5, which, let's be honest, with all the additions such as Lumen GI, Nanite, Niagara Particle Systems, Cell-Based World Systems, and new procedural kinematic animations, make it one of the most, if not the most powerful engines on the market. All this makes it a far more compelling proposition over every other engine, except for the fact that it's owned by the Chinese. I have had a couple of attempts with Unreal in the past, and they haven't gone well, but this time is the time. This time's the time, third time lucky, and all that. As I already had a Udemy course in Unreal C++ in the back catalogue from the last time I tried to get into Unreal, it looked like a good place to start. Plus it was one done by Game Dev TV, who were the same guys that did the last Unity course, and that one was really good. As with the Unity course, the first game they make is a simple text-based puzzle game. That way you can start to get to grips with the language first without being too overwhelmed by the engine. We began with the obligatory Hello World being printed on the terminal, followed by learning how to skip a line and then print on a new line. From that we were able to set up the basic instructions for the player and then began adding inputs. We set up some logic where we could set up a code and then the program would display the product of its sum. The player then had to guess the code from those hints. A couple of if-else statements and we had it checking whether the player had guessed correctly. All that was left to do after that was to get the game to pick a random integer value between 0 and the difficulty level, add 2 to it, then increment the difficulty level as the game went on. And that was pretty much it really. All in all, I got most of it okay. C++ is a good bit different from C#, so the transition from C# to C++ is going to be a much bigger shift than going from GML to C#, but I was feeling pretty confident. Next up was another word game, but this time in Unreal. This really shouldn't be that much of a surprise, as it's very much in the same structure as the Unity course that they did. First is just a project to get you using the language without getting overwhelmed by the engine nonsense. Then the next one is actually messing around within the engine. In this instance, it looks as though this was meant to be the first project, but then it appears that they added the previous one on accounts of C++'s sharp edges. Step 1 was downloading the project and having a play around with some of the assets. Then messing around with the train editor, which went well. Had a bit of an issue with the IntelliSense for Visual Studio Code, which I tried to fix by using Visual Studio 2019, which also went well. A few updates later and it was working again, all par for the course when coding. Next up, we set up an input system so we could display the player's input on the board, followed by a parrot back feature. We then set up a hidden word and checked to see if the player's guess was correct. We then added a function to check the length of both the hidden word and the length of the player's guess. Next up came the player's lives and a fail state and a check to see if the word the player had entered was an isogram. If you don't know what an isogram is, then that's okay, neither did I until I did the course. Vinegar strokes now. We imported a huge word list which was then automatically checked for isograms. Any that weren't were rejected as potential hidden words, and then a random one of the remaining was selected to be the hidden word. Obviously all of these debug lines would be removed once the game was finalised, they just made the game a lot easier to test. The final part was to just add the bulls and cows assessment part. If a letter of the player's guess was in the right place, they'd get a bull, and if a letter was correct but in the wrong place, they would get a cow. And that was that really, all coded and fully functional. And I really didn't understand much of it at all. I've got to say, C++ is quite a complex language and it has a lot of sharp edges. And even coming from a C# background, I am really struggling. I think the big problem is these two previous projects have both been very conceptual. I've always struggled with that side of programming. I find things a lot easier once I have a tangible thing that I'm trying to manipulate. Plus, all the way through this one and the first one, I found it really hard to see how half of this would ever come up in a practical sense. Still, it's all experience, and the next project looked a lot more real world, or so I hoped. And that's about it for this episode. This is all just a bit of a catch up. I'm a little bit further down the line now than this, and it has to be said, C++ really is it's a doozy of a language. It really is. It's really got a lot of sharp edges, and this course so far has been very kind of, as I sort of said, conceptual. Not an awful lot that I would sort of say, you know, we're going to do player movement, we're going to do camera movement, we're going to do that, but that's fine. It's all like I say, getting used to C++ and learning how that works and all the shenanigans there. So all in all, it's going quite well. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget, there is an awful lot of previous videos to go back over, and why not check out some of my other content and give me a little subscribe, and that would mean the world to me, because as you can see, I don't have many. No, if you could give me a subscribe, that would be sweet. I do upload, just not very regularly, so I'm doing all the wrong things for somebody that wants to grow a YouTube channel. Anyway, thank you very much for listening and watching and such, and I will see you anon, guys. Take it easy. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Oh, if you could check out my Teespring store, I have loads of good stuff in there. Go buy a t-shirt, they're all cool, and definitely none of them are in breach of copyright, so get them before they don't breach the copyright. Take it easy, bye!